Greg is going to start us off this hour in Tennessee. Welcome to the Dave Ramsey Show, Greg.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What's up?
My question is, I have been a listener of yours for decades and never took my natural peace, but I followed it. Pretty much your rules, 99 times out of 100. My question is, for those of us who have become debt-free and we have no debt, and at what point in time do we realize, hey, I've busted my butt, say, for decades. When do I determine when can I start splurging some with my finances? Buy a little, not really, like a toy or a car or whatever.
Yeah, probably about 5 years ago for you.
People tell me I'm cheap every day.
You're
so
probably late.
Surprised.
You're probably late. What happens to us is that we live like no one else, so that later we can live and give like no one else, and then we forget to do it.
Okay.
So you've lived like no one else. You've been on rice and beans, and you got out of debt, and you got used to living on the cheap, and you've been piling up money, and you've done a great job, and you're probably debt free, probably got a big pile of money, and now it's emotionally hard to loosen up a little bit because you're afraid
Exactly.
you're going to screw it up.
Exactly.
So the rule I use is that when I'm working with people who have built some wealth and struggling with that, and sometimes honestly Sharon and I struggle with it because our money has grown more than our emotional grasp of it. We still feel like we are worth a lot less than we're actually mathematically worth. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
Yeah. And so what we say is, if we're going to splurge, if we're going to buy something that's just a crazy, what we used to would call a crazy luxury item, like when we were broke people and we would say, no one should ever spend that on that. Have you ever heard that? And so,
yes,
and you're getting ready to now. You're getting ready to spend that on that, which is very cool. You should buy that car, So the rule of thumb I use is this. What is the ratio of that to my net worth? Okay, so let's pretend.
Okay.
Let's use an example. Let's pretend you had $1 million in mutual funds in your 401k. How much have you got?
Just in 401k or all total?
All total.
About 1.7 million.
Okay, cool. I was guessing. I'm about right. Okay, so way to go. Congratulations, you did it. Okay, so let's say you bought a crazy butt $100,000 car. Okay?
Okay.
And you didn't even put insurance on it, and you forgot to set the brake, and it went off the cliff and burned. Now you're worth $1.6 million. Well, whoop-de-doop-de. Now that's a kind of a bizarre example, but I mean, if you just completely set $100,000 on fire in your backyard and watched it burn, you literally wouldn't change your life at all.
Okay.
So you can splurge like that, and it, but now if you start talking about you're going to spend $800,000 on something crazy, now that's half your freaking world. We got to stop and think about this one.
Right.
You see what I'm doing? Now I've got a friend that's worth $200 million.
Wow.
So him buying a $200,000 car is like most people buying a biscuit. Right? Ratio-wise, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect his life. And yet, where I grew up and the way I grew up, no one should ever spend that on a car. Well, he's got hundreds of millions of dollars. It's irrelevant. He gives more than that in charity in 20 minutes. The ministries he supports with zeros and zeros and zeros on the end, and he has a nice car. And people gripe at him about his car, of course, But the guy's got, it's a small percentage of his world. So the way you're not screwing up is if you set fire to that much money, would it screw up your life?
Correct.
And so if you want to go on a vacation and you've always wanted to take a cruise around the world and it's $28,000 or it's $128,000, you can do it and enjoy that vacation, and it really will not affect your life. You've earned the right mathematically. If you want to give that much to somebody, do you find a charity, a ministry, and God says for you to, let's build this thing, a small house over here for $100,000 or something. You can do that, and it will not affect your life. But that's how we gauge it is, if after this thing, if it just was set fire to, are we still okay? Did we even notice? And if the answer is no, then we're not spending too much on that. And so,
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yeah, but you don't really have like a percentage that you.
No,
have,
I would just say, I mean, it's kind of a common sense thing, though. I mean, if it's approaching 50%, it would be too much, right?
This proves to me how cheap I am. I'm just looking at splurging, maybe spending $15,000 on a
Yeah,
car.
you're too cheap. You need to go buy that today. This is why you did all this. You've worked your butt off, man. You came from nothing, and you have $1.7 million. Am I right?
Correct.
No one
Pretty much.
gave you this money. You didn't hit the lottery. You've been working your butt off and being diligent. You've earned the right to enjoy your money.
I used to work 60 hours a week.
Yep, I know.
For years.
You don't get to have $1.7 million working 30 hours a week. You know?
Correct.
You're an everyday millionaire. You fit the typology exactly. And all I'm doing is saying, yes, you not only have permission, you almost have the emotional obligation to treat yourself to some things. And you need to make sure you're doing some generosity things that match that too.
Been there, and I get more joy out of that than I do being the selfish person buying it for my personal self.
Absolutely. So that's another thing we do is if we spend $15,000 on an item, we might go buy 3 used cars for single moms and spend $15,000 on them.
Excellent.
Sometimes we match ourselves. And maybe that's just because we're, so we don't feel guilty or something, but maybe it's also just keeping us in balance. Because if you got generosity and spending running about the same level and neither one of them are draining you down to where you're broke, you're living a good life.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your advice.
Hey, I appreciate getting to talk to you. Thank you for letting me get up on my soapbox. Because that's a wonderful, because I don't get to take that call very often. Most of the time, as you guys are on the other side, you're trying to learn to be that guy. You want to be him when you grow up. But live like no one else so that later you can live and give like no one else. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but it yields a harvest of righteousness, Scripture says. The diligent prosper, Scripture says. Not the lazy, not the ones who run their mouth. The diligent. Did you hear him? What did he say? 60 hours a week. I heard it. Great place to go when you're broke. To work.